experience on, what was working, what wasn't, and try to incorporate as much of that as possible into the new funding program. So the federal program I mentioned, the Emergency Rental Assistance, ERA, you may be seeing this in newsletters that you're on at the national level. ERA or ERAP is the new federal structure for it. And there actually now are two versions of that, a 1.0 and a 2.0. So the first version of that is the one that was passed in December and became available to us at the end of January to kind of request from Treasury. That one, Delaware has an allocation of 200 million, and that's available through September of 2022. The American Rescue Plan actually included another batch of funding for ERA, so a 2.0. And under that one, Delaware may be able to access up to 152 million. I say up to because there are a lot of different kind of spending benchmarks on the first batch of money and on the second batch of money. So how that will shake out. I think in the first version of the program, 1.0, that 200 million was the small state minimum. I think they set the small state minimum really high. And it happened that I think the states that got the minimum ended up getting like per capita way more than states that were getting an allocation under the allocation formula. So that small state minimum came down quite a bit in the second program. So as I mentioned, there's federally defined eligibility now, and also on eligible costs, housing costs, and utilities. And there is also some room for housing stability services. We are just starting to look at that piece of it and have really been focused on the rental assistance piece so far. So starting to dig in a little bit more, some of the feedback we got on the first two versions of the program, first a really strong message about reducing documentation as much as possible, broad interpretation of COVID-19 impact, not requiring a ton of documentation about that if we could avoid it. Communication is really critical, especially since there are so many parties involved. There's us and the tenant and the landlord. And portal features like status notifications, communications about when payments are made and how, and making sure everybody gets the deposit ACH stub for that are really important. And that was something we really worked to improve in this new version of the program. How to apply, that both landlords and tenants should both have the option to submit applications. They're definitely, like I said, there's such a huge range of circumstances here that as many kind of different doors as possible as what we were going for. And then reaching households, that more targeted outreach and offering help to folks to submit applications could help in reaching folks that we might not have been getting in the first and second versions of the program. So some things that are new, there's a new application portal. The tenant or the landlord now can initiate the application. I say initiate because if the landlord is initiating it, they're not able to do a whole lot, which I think was a big adjustment point from the second version of the program. The 2.0 version of the program, the landlord kind of had to do everything. They had to get everything from the tenant, upload it all. They were like the one who was logging in and uploading everything. But in this version of the program, they can initiate it and start it, and that will prompt like a message to the tenant for them to register and do their portion of the application. But it's fairly.
Marlena,
yeah.
Can you share this? Can you share these PowerPoints?
Like send them around? Sure.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
So that definitely has been an adjustment for landlords, I think, in the first month or so, is communicating around that and making sure everyone understood kind of how it was different. There are a lot more communication features in the new portal. The documentation has been significantly reduced. There was a little bit of a waiting game, waiting for Treasury to put out some of the guidance for the program on what was acceptable, and they ended up being pretty flexible about it. So there are a lot of options for self-attestation if folks can't provide documents. A lot of what Treasury said was, well, you have to try, like you have to try to get documents. But if you can't, then we can accept self-attestation or documentation alternatives. So I think some of the documentation material looks, I think, much longer and more overwhelming, but the actual requirements are significantly less. The reason it looks so long is because there's so many different options of ways you and things you can provide. So it doesn't have to be photo ID. It can be any number of other proof of residency. It does not have to be a lease. It can be documentation of past payments, things like that. We did add utilities that are due to the landlord. Right now, it's only utilities that are due to the landlord. That was not covered in 2.0 though, so that is an addition here. And a really significant difference is that the program can cover up to 15 months, not a dollar maximum as a whole. There is a monthly maximum of $2,000, so I mean, that's pretty high. And we're not seeing many folks hitting that. We looked back at the rent requests that we had in 2.0 and looking at fair market rents, and well, 2,000 was high enough to capture most folks who might need help without being too wild, especially since we have enough funding. But the 15 months is, I think, an important point because it can be any combination of arrears and forward rent. So the previous DEHAP could do arrears, and it could do up to 2 months in advance, I think we were doing. So right now, with the 15 months, folks do not have to be behind right now. They do not have to be in arrears. It can be all forward rent, and that can be done 3 months at a time. So we can say you're applying now, and you owe for May. So if you're applying now, you're not behind, but you owe for May, we could pay May, June, and July. And in July, you would need to come back to your application and kind of, I'm not sure what the best word is, but kind of renew it. And if you, depending on like the income documentation that you were providing, you may need to provide some more. And then we can do another 3 months, and that can go on for up to 15 months. If you owe 12 months already, the max we could do would be those 12 months plus another 3. And it can go back to April of 2020. I think I already covered most of that. April 2020 on the future rent, utilities to the landlord. We can also cover fees if they're stated in the lease, like trash, or even if there's, if there's an eviction filing and there's filing and court fees that are in there, as long as it's documented, we can cover that as well. We did do a lot more marketing and outreach and are continuing to do that. I think in the previous versions of the program, we kind of didn't have as much time to focus on this piece and mostly relied on social media. We have a new website for the program, which is decovidhousinghelp.com. We'll be adding other things on there as well. There'll be some homeowner assistance that will be added in the coming months. And so that'll be kind of a hub for other programs too. But kind of everything COVID related we're putting there. And right now it's primarily DEHAP. There's also a dedicated phone line for it. As you can probably imagine, managing communications for a program this big is really huge. There's a massive number of calls. And so we set up a separate line with dedicated staff for that line for the program. We also have a lot more printed materials. We've been working with partners like the Department of Labor and the Food Bank. If you would like any of those, we have rack cards and postcards. I put our Director of PR's email here. Her name is Jessica. We can certainly send some to you. They're pretty evergreen. There's not a lot of program detail on them. So it's mainly pointing folks to the website, but we have those in English and Spanish, and happy to share if you would like some. And we also have like social media graphics and things like that. So if you would like any of that, happy to get that to you. And in the stakeholder outreach that we did, we got a lot of really helpful suggestions in this area. So if you have others, and if you think of groups that we should be reaching, or email lists that would be good to get an email blast, or groups that could use a webinar training, please reach out to me or to Jessica and let us know. So the household eligibility, as I said, there's some federal eligibility now. It's a lot of words, but it's pretty, it is pretty basic, thankfully. So to be an eligible household, you have to meet all 3 of these things. The first is that 1 or more individuals must have qualified for unemployment or have a reduction in income, increased costs, or other financial hardship due directly or indirectly to the pandemic. So it doesn't have to be just like, I lost my job because the place I work closed. Any number of things, like I had to stop working because my kids were home on virtual school, or any number of any number of situations can fall under there. And that if folks were receiving unemployment, we are looking for documentation of that, but otherwise that is all self-attestation. In the portal, folks check boxes about the nature of the hardship, and there's a text box to enter a little information about how it's related to the pandemic, and folks are self-attesting to that. So, this came up pretty frequently. Just difficulty getting documentation from employers, or if your hours were cut, like pre and post pay stubs, don't have to do that. The second is some evidence of housing instability. So this could be any past due notice or evidence of housing cost burden or past experience of homelessness, and that's also self-attestation. Most folks who are applying are already in arrears, so that kind of by default is evidence of housing instability. But for folks who are current, they're self-attesting that they've had a past due notice in the past, or their rent is more than 30% of their income. That does not have to be documented either. And then lastly, income, and there are several different ways to document income. The easiest is to use folks' 2020 tax returns, just the first 2 pages. And if you do that, you don't have to come back and redo it every 3 months. That's all we need. You're good. So you do have to come back and let us know that you still need assistance. But if you're doing other income documentation methods, you do have to come back and redo those every 3 months. I'm surprised that it seems like a lot of folks are not doing the 2020 tax returns, which that would definitely be a lot easier for everyone. I'm surprised that more folks are doing the past 30 days of income, but we'll see. That may change. Not everyone has done their taxes yet. A couple of other eligibility topics that come up frequently. So manufactured homes on leased land are eligible for lot rent. Subsidized units are eligible for assistance with the tenant portion of the rent, and we do need documentation of that, so that can get a little complicated. Especially folks if they have several income certifications and the tenant portion of the rent has changed a couple of times. We will need documentation of that, like the statement that they get from the Public Housing Authority. But that can be covered. Also vouchers, room rental, as long as there's either a lease or evidence of past payments like receipts or canceled checks or money order receipts, things like that. And a really important point I want to emphasize is that past recipients are also eligible, and the past assistance does not count towards the 15-month max. So they do have to apply again under the new application system. So that is the downside, but the upside is that they can still get more assistance, and it doesn't count towards that max under the new program. A couple of things that are not eligible. The first one comes up frequently. So arrears from when the tenant has already been evicted or moved out. The tenant needs to still be in the unit. It could be that they are scheduled to move out in a month. So sometimes folks might have like a stipulated agreement through the courts that says they're leaving May 30th. That's okay. That's obviously not ideal. That's not our kind of preferred outcome, but we can still pay the arrears in that situation. But if the tenant is already out of the unit, we can't do that. Hotel and motel stays, we can't do those. Can't do security deposits, and can't do utilities that are due to the utility company. So we can't pay your Delmarva bill to Delmarva right now. If you owe your landlord, like for water or sewer or things like that, and it's owed to the landlord, we can do that right now. The required documentation is, like I said, pretty minimal. This is an ideal situation. This is like, totally typical, assume kind of best possible scenario. Folks would have a lease. It doesn't have to be current. It can be expired. Since they continue on a month-to-month basis, the rent amount needs to match. That's really what we're looking for documentation of, that they're paying, who they're paying, and how much are they paying, and that they're paying for the property that is entered. Ideally, just a driver's license. Folks don't have that. There's other options for ID, and if you don't have, it doesn't have to be photo ID. If folks even don't have photo ID, we can go with proof of residency. I think we have a link to the DMV list. So anything DMV will take, we will take. The income documentation, ideally folks have their 2020 tax returns, but like I said, if not, they can do their past 30 days, and the past 30 days, if they don't have pay stubs, they can self-attest to their income. So there's definitely a couple of tiers that you can kind of work your way through on documentation. So even if there is no income documentation, they can still do a self-attestation through the portal. And then unemployment, if available. So if folks did receive unemployment, if they have that statement of monetary determination, that's ideal. But if folks don't have that, they can do that self-attestation in the portal. And it's a lot of e-signatures as you're going through. Very easy to do. So there's not a lot of like form filling out the portal. Like if you're doing the self-attestation options, there's, circles to check and spots to put in info, and then it will like kind of spit out the thing that you need to self-attest to and type in your name as the e-signature. For the landlord, we do need a W-9. That's really a non-negotiable. Got to have a W-9. We need them to confirm the rent that's due and voided check or other account information in order to do direct deposit. We can issue checks. Don't like to, we prefer not to. So we try to do direct deposit wherever we can, but it's not required. So how to apply? The decovidhousinghelp.com website is the place to start. There's a link on there that goes into the portal. It's a screenshot of what the portal looks like. To start, if you see this blue tenants apply today, that takes the tenants initially through a couple of pre-qualification questions. And if those are all a yes, they get to a registration page where they register for the portal, and then they can start working on their application. One important thing here is that all applications must be submitted via the portal. We can't take anything by mail, email, fax. We can't do it. We did allow that in 2.0, and while we didn't get that many, just handling the ones that we did get was extremely time-consuming and difficult. And I mean, my take on it was that we weren't serving those folks well that way because there was a lot of delay. We frequently were getting, one envelope from the landlord and another envelope from the tenant and trying to match stuff up. So we can't accept documentation that's submitted that way, but to make sure there's some help available for folks who don't have technology access, we have some community partners that can assist with submitting applications for households with technology or language or other barriers. I will say it is not that hard to do. The application is pretty straightforward. So especially, if you're working with any families already, any of the documentation that is required is likely stuff that is already pretty handy. So it's not, it's not something that takes like hours and hours to work through. It's pretty straightforward. I think the most common issue we're seeing is folks who just don't have the technology access to be able to do it. So key things to emphasize: the maximum months. DEHAP should be able to cover almost all arrears now in the vast majority of cases. I think in the second version of the program, we were seeing a fair number that were like in court, but DEHAP couldn't cover everything. At this time, DEHAP should be able to cover just about everything that that folks owe to the landlord. The up to 15 months maximum and forward rent 3 months at a time. Tenants or landlords can initiate the application. It's kind of preferable for the tenant to be the initial applicant. I think that works a little bit better. Other than some larger property management companies like to initiate the applications themselves, which is fine. But it seems easiest when the tenant initiates it themselves. The documentation has been significantly reduced. So another message I really am trying to get out there is that, folks who think they might not be, who think they aren't eligible, or who looked at the program in the past and thought they weren't eligible, should apply again because it's a lot more broad. And with the self-attestation options on documentation, most folks should be eligible, should find that they're eligible. The previous recipients can apply again, but they do need to apply again. And oh, I need to update that. The application help is available now. The last time I did this presentation, it was available soon, but that is available now. So a couple things that are coming up next. We are looking forward to adding utility assistance. I don't have a specific ETA on that right now, but we understand that's a significant need, and it's eligible under the federal program. We're looking to add that into the portal and the mix of things we can do. I think knowing the scale of the program, we really want to make sure that we kind of have systems set up with the utility companies to communicate about those payments and confirming how much folks owe. But we will be adding that. And then the housing stability services piece is another thing we're looking forward to. And we'll be working to figure out kind of what exactly is eligible there. Treasury has not put out a huge amount of guidance about that yet. It seems pretty broad, but it seems like some states are thinking about those housing stability services as a way to get at some of the things that kind of can't fit under the rental assistance side. So we'll be digging into that a little bit more and seeing what some of those gaps are. And then I know another topic that has come up is the coordination with rapid rehousing, that rapid can't cover that long, even with some of the changes in the waivers. I think someone who is already getting rapid should be able to apply. The rapid would need to end. I want to dig into this a little bit more and make sure that we don't have federal duplication of benefits issues or things, and make sure that all those issues are sorted out, and maybe we can do some more formal coordination on making a transition from rapid to DEHAP. But we need to dig into that a little bit more. Oh, that was it. And yeah, I think those are the big things. I know the utility assistance, we are getting a lot of utility requests, and know that that's an issue. And I think that's probably top of our list within the next probably 2 months to have that launched and available. And so folks who the eligibility will be the same for DEHAP. So it's likely we will kind of mash that into our existing portal, and folks who already got the rental will be able to just go back and add their utility. Also hoping it might drive some applications for the rental side of the program. So if someone just needs utilities, but they're kind of on the same portal and realize they can get help with their rent too at the same time, and just need to check a box.
I'm sorry, Marlene, did you say rapid rehousing clients are eligible for this program?
So I don't see why they wouldn't be, because subsidized tenants are. I think I want to dig into it a little bit more and make sure that there's no particularly duplication of benefits issues, and if there are ways to kind of coordinate it more strategically. I'm not sure, but I don't see why not.
You'll get back to us on that.
It's another source of subsidy, and things like housing choice vouchers. The structure is pretty similar. So yeah,
will you get back to us on that?
Yeah, and I actually have been wanting to maybe do a focus group session with the providers to talk more about what are the gaps. I think that could play into the housing stability services too. I know there's been a fire hose of rapid funding as well, but it doesn't cover everything. So if there are gaps where we can where we can help fill with some of the other resources. I saw Cindy turned her video on, so she might have.
Yeah, I mean, that would be, we get those questions a lot every week. The other question that we get, Marlena, is how quickly are the checks getting to the landlords? Do you have an estimate on that?
So right now, a lot of applications have been approved, but the landlords have not been paid yet. There's a landlord side of the portal that is not quite fully up. So the way the application process works, the tenant stuff is approved first, and then that prompts an outreach to the landlord to confirm the rent due, to enter all their payment information, and that's what will be happening next. And then they get paid after they check those boxes and upload that stuff. So that's that has been a troubleshooting item with setting up our new portal. I think once it's all once it's all good to go, we will be making payments at least once a week. So it will be very fast from there. It's just been a setup issue.
So Marlene, I have a question in that same vein. And that is, so once the landlord does their side, is it a possibility or is it a part of the process where they get notification, that you do this and then you will get the check as opposed to waiting, the tenants waiting, the landlord. So once the landlord puts the information, is there like a confirmation that it's coming down the pike, or is it they're just out there waiting?
Yeah, so that's one of the features actually that really drew us to this software provider that we're using, is that there are a lot of different status notification options. And once the landlord registers, either one of them can log in and see the status. They can send messages to the reviewer. It will also like spit back payment notices, receipts, things like that.
So now I have one more question, and it's not in this. Just curious of the percentage of the last go around and this one that's new, the percentage in use that you're getting the applications in the portal. Just curious about the percentage of use.
Do you mean like how many are we getting like that are paper applications, or just how many as a whole?
No, how many in the portal overall?
So actually, I think I had a slide about this that I took off. Oh no, unhide. There it is. So in the first version of the program, around 1,200, the second version around 2,950. We did deduplicate those, and there actually was not as much duplication across those first two as I thought there would be. It was actually only like a couple hundred. So the kind of total households is around 4,000. For the new program so far, I think the last numbers I saw were around 3,000. But they're not all completed and submitted. So folks can start their application and then come back and finish it later. Also, if the landlord initiates it, it is flagged, it shows as incomplete until the tenant comes in and does their part. So I think 3,000 is, on submitted, like that are fully submitted, around 2,500, and about 4,000 total that have been initiated in the portal. So altogether, for all the ones that have been initiated, so that includes like ones where the landlord started it but the tenant hasn't finished it, requests of about $20 million. So that doesn't include, I'm sorry?
No, just curious, that's all.
Hi, Marlena. This is Sophie from DFS. Thanks for this
Hi.
presentation. It was really informative.
Do you have a
Yeah.
question?
Yeah, so I'm assuming that youth who are using the SRAP voucher in the foster care program would be eligible to apply for this depending upon their specific situation, correct?
Yep.
Okay. What about those youth using a FUP voucher?
Yep.
Same. Okay. Okay, great. Thanks.
As long as they meet the other eligibility stuff, which I'm sure they would on income,
Right.
and just the COVID-19 hardship piece.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And I see another question about the same thing about SRAP recipients. So yes, SRAP is included under the subsidized units. So there's no barrier to eligibility there. It can create some extra documentation needed to document the tenant portion of the rent. I'm curious if any of you are working with folks who have applied. Have you been like hearing about it kind of out there in the world?
So I've heard about it, and a friend of mine actually applied as well. And she's told me that she like is receiving a message that says like a conditional approval. And so my question is, does that mean that you're waiting on the landlord, or what kind of message or would a client receive if they've been approved?
So in most cases, right now, that means the landlord piece is what needs to happen next. For folks who have an active eviction filing, we do need to see that the case has either been withdrawn or resolved. So if they have an active eviction filing, it will go to conditional approval until we get that documentation. So
I'm sorry, just in this case, she doesn't have any active eviction. So what other supplemental documentation would the landlord have to submit?
She can disregard that message. It relates to getting that payment side set up. So some are kind of in a brief holding pattern until we can do that landlord back and forth to get their confirmation on the rents due. But if she doesn't have an active eviction filing, doesn't need to worry about any documentation about that.
Okay.
Yes, there is a lot that goes into when you're when starting a new portal, a new system, managing all of like the auto communications that go out from all the different places at all the different steps.
I'm sure.
Yes. So we are trying to manage those and make sure that they're like everyone's getting the right message at the right time. And I know the eviction one has been difficult. Some folks were getting that note about evictions. We've been sending folks direct messages through the portal. If that's the case, saying, disregard the message about the conditional approval.
Okay, thank you.
Well, please do send folks our way. And, particularly if you want printed materials, or we also have like a base email that's like easy to forward. So if you have, lists of folks you would like to get it out to, we can share that, the social media graphics, all sorts of things. So we welcome everyone's suggestions on getting the word out and appreciate the help there.
So I just think it would be helpful if we had the PowerPoints, because I want to share them with my peers, especially Patrick, that has clients on the other side.
Yeah, so I'll make sure I get this to the CUC folks, and then I'll make sure I'm going to take a screenshot right now. Oh wait,
Marlena, this would be the same presentation that you use for our training, our initial DEHAP training, because if that's the case, we do have that posted online, as well as the webinar that you.
Okay.
Yeah, so and Pat, I can send you over that direct link to the page where the PowerPoint slides as well as the webinar is posted.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, it's pretty much the same. But Pat, I'll send you our like standard like PR email too. It's like easy to forward, just has the links and like basic info. I'll send that to you too.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, Marlena.
No, thank you. Thank you all for your interest and questions. And if other things come up, feel free to email me directly anytime, and I'm happy to help.
So Marlena, I just want to be correct. Rachel said that when we finish our session, it was over. So do we go back, or are we finished when we're finished with you? Or
actually,
Alicia,
yes, so
can you answer us?
Yes, ma'am. So the training will or the meeting is over at the end of this session. So you are free to leave if anyone doesn't have any more questions or want any more information. You are free to go if Marlena doesn't have anything else to add.
I'm not going to make everybody stay.
And if anybody is interested in bouncing to another breakout session, such as the advocacy and policy or the vaccination discussion, just let me know, and I can pop you in that session as well. But you are free to go.
Bounce me over to the vaccination session, please.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Alicia, can you bounce me over to the policies?
Yes.
Housing and policies.
Yes, Ms. B, I got you.
Please. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Marlena, and thank you, Alicia.
So
Absolutely.
Mrs. Hayward, can you send me over to vaccination also?
Yes.
Thank you.
So Felicia, is it possible if they have a PowerPoint or handout that you can send me one for the vaccinations? I don't have any case managers, so
Yes.
I see them at the door. So this has been a fun 2 days, but
Yes, I
fine.
can get those materials over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. Goodbye,
You're
everyone.
welcome. Goodbye. Have a good one.
Bye.
Marlena, can I ask one quick question before we go?
Yeah, I figured I would sit here and see if
Part of
anybody
it.
stayed.
Huh?
I figured I would sit here and see if anybody stayed and wanted anything else from me.
So,
What's up?
one quick thing about this whole thing. So we had a young lady come in who was behind on her rent because she failed to tell. No, I forgot how this works out. However it is, the young lady has Section 8. Are you saying that they can
Mhm.
or they can't? They can.
They can. Yep.
Okay.
We can cover the tenant portion of the rent.
Tenant portion of the rent, as long as they can prove they have a COVID-related issue.
As long as they are at least willing to self-attest that their financial hardship is due directly or indirectly to the pandemic.
Awesome.
So
I will call her back and correct my work.
it is the documentation on the impact is, I think has been a real kind of game changer on people being able to get through. So
Okay.
yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so very much.
No problem. I like seeing you there. I miss coming up there.
I know we have to have a meeting. I just said that. I actually was going to send you a separate email, you and Julie,
Mhm.
about a voucher. I wanted to see if I can get a second year voucher and what that would entail. So
Mhm.
what needs to happen. So
Okay.
not even I was going to. I actually am in the midst of typing this email. So I was typing it yesterday, but just never got a chance to finish it and send it.
Can they apply for DEHAP?
I mean, I guess she's getting back on her feet.
Because DEHAP will pay 100% of the rent. So
But she's not behind.
yeah, but like the forward rent, oh yeah. I mean, I guess I'm not recommending like dropping her voucher at all. I'm just sharing program information. So, if someone's in SRAP, they're doing the income certification and paying, they're paying a portion of the rent. DEHAP, since we're doing so much volume, like we are not doing that. So folks are not required to be paying a portion of the rent. We will pay 100% of the rent up to $2,000 a month under DEHAP.
So, because what's going to happen is come June, but she'll just be getting back on. Like we're just going to be getting her working at that point. Like she's just coming.